The rain hammered against the metal walkways of Station Zirion like angry fists, creating a symphony of chaos that most beings hurried to escape. The massive space station served as a neutral trading hub where dozens of alien species conducted business, their colorful forms rushing between covered passages to avoid the artificial weather system's downpour. Among the rushing crowds, a small human figure moved with deliberate slowness, his worn jacket already soaked through. Kai-chan had learned long ago that rushing never helped anyone, especially when you had nowhere important to be. At 16, he possessed the kind of quiet wisdom that came from watching the galaxy's supposedly advanced civilizations treat each other with casual cruelty. His dark eyes swept the crowded marketplace, taking in the familiar scene of merchants haggling, traders arguing, and the wealthy stepping over the less fortunate without a second glance. The human colony ship Perseverance had docked at Zirion 3 days ago for emergency repairs, leaving its passengers stranded in the station's expensive guest quarters. Most humans kept to their assigned areas, uncomfortable with the alien environment and the subtle hostility they faced from other species. But Kai had always been different. Where others saw barriers, he saw opportunities to understand. Where others felt fear, he felt curiosity. Watch where you're walking, little primate. The harsh voice belonged to a Zephyrian trader, his blue-scaled face twisted with disgust as Kai accidentally brushed against his ornate robes. The alien stood nearly 8 feet tall, his serpentine features marking him as a member of one of the galaxy's most influential commercial species. Behind him, several other traders from various worlds laughed at the confrontation. "Sorry," Kai said simply, stepping back with hands raised in a peaceful gesture. He had learned that responding to insults only made things worse for humans in these situations. "Sorry doesn't clean my ceremonial robes, does it?" The Zephyrian's voice carried the arrogance common among his species. "Your kind should stay in the lower levels where you belong. This market is for real civilizations." A small crowd began to gather, drawn by the promise of entertainment. Kai recognized the hungry look in their eyes, the same expression predators wore when circling wounded prey. He started to turn away, knowing that engaging would only escalate the situation, but something else caught his attention. In the shadow of a massive support pillar, barely visible through the rushing crowds, sat a figure that seemed forgotten by the galaxy itself. The being appeared humanoid but was clearly not human, with pale green skin that had an almost translucent quality and large, dark eyes that held depths of exhaustion. Her clothes were little more than tattered rags, and her thin frame suggested she hadn't eaten a proper meal in weeks. What struck Kai most wasn't her appearance but her complete invisibility to everyone else. Hundreds of beings passed by every minute, their expensive shoes splashing through puddles inches from where she sat, yet not one acknowledged her existence. She might as well have been a piece of discarded equipment for all the attention she received. "Are you even listening to me, human whelp?" The Zephyrian's voice had grown more aggressive, and Kai could see his companions encouraging the confrontation. "I said your species should..." "Excuse me," Kai interrupted, his voice calm but firm. "I think you dropped something." The trader looked down, confused, then back at Kai with growing anger. "I dropped nothing, you insolent." "Your dignity," Kai said quietly. "It must have fallen somewhere around the time you started bullying children." The crowd's laughter shifted, some now directed at the flustered Zephyrian. Before the situation could escalate further, Kai walked away, moving directly toward the forgotten figure by the pillar. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his emergency food packet, a compressed meal bar that was supposed to last him until the ship departed. The pale woman looked up as Kai approached, her large eyes widening with surprise. Up close, he could see the intricate patterns that seemed to shimmer just beneath her translucent skin, and he realized she belonged to a species he had never encountered before. Her beauty was haunting, ethereal in a way that suggested nobility despite her current circumstances. "Here," Kai said, offering the food packet. "You look like you could use this more than I can." The woman stared at the offered food for a long moment, as if unable to comprehend the gesture. I cannot accept charity from a child," she whispered, her voice carrying a musical quality that seemed at odds with her appearance. "It's not charity," Kai replied with a gentle smile. "It's just one person helping another. Besides, I'm not really a child, I'm 16, which is practically ancient in human years." Despite herself, the woman's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Ancient, indeed," she murmured. "But why? Your species is not known for kindness to strangers." The comment stung more than Kai cared to admit, but he knew it reflected how humans were perceived throughout the galaxy. They were seen as aggressive, selfish, and primitive, a young species that had somehow stumbled into space travel without developing the wisdom to use it responsibly.
Maybe that's exactly why I should be kind, he said. Someone has to start changing that reputation.
Before the woman could respond, the Zephyrian trader and his companions arrived, their faces flushed with indignation and alcohol. The marketplace crowd followed like scavengers, eager to witness whatever entertainment was about to unfold. So this is where the little savage ran off to, the Zephyrian sneered, his forked tongue flicking out to taste the air.
Consorting with beggars now? How perfectly appropriate.
His companions laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the station's metal walls.
Kai recognized some of them, a group of Corvan merchants known for their ruthless business practices, several hegemony officials whose species considered themselves the galaxy's natural rulers, and a few hangers-on from various worlds who enjoyed watching others suffer.
Look at this touching scene, one of the Corvan said mockingly.
The primitive human thinks he can solve the galaxy's problems with a food packet. How wonderfully naive.
Perhaps we should teach him about the real galaxy, suggested a hegemony official, his gray skin glistening with moisture.
Show him what happens when inferior species try to play at nobility.
The pale woman beside Kai seemed to shrink further into the shadows, but her eyes had taken on a strange quality, as if she were seeing something the others couldn't. Kai felt a subtle shift in the air around them, like the moment before a storm breaks, but he attributed it to his own rising anger. She's just hungry, Kai said, his voice steady despite the growing hostility around them.
There's nothing wrong with helping someone who needs it. The Zephyrian laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Help?
Child, you don't understand the first thing about galactic society. This creature is exactly where she belongs, forgotten and irrelevant.
Just like your entire species will be in a few generations.
The humans are a mistake, agreed the hegemony official.
A cosmic accident that somehow developed space travel before wisdom.
They spread through the galaxy like a virus, contaminating everything they touch with their primitive emotions and illogical behavior. The crowd murmured agreement, and Kai felt the familiar weight of being judged for his entire species' perceived failings. He had heard these arguments countless times. Humans were too emotional, too unpredictable, too willing to act on impulse rather than calculated logic. They were seen as a cautionary tale about what happened when evolution moved too quickly. At least we care about something other than profit, Kai replied, his composure beginning to crack. At least we don't walk past suffering and pretend it doesn't exist.
Caring is weakness, the Zephyrian hissed. Emotions are the enemy of progress. This is why your species will never truly join galactic civilization. You're too busy feeling to think clearly.
The woman beside Kai had grown very still, her strange eyes fixed on the group of aliens with an intensity that made the air itself seem to thicken. Several of the traders shifted uncomfortably, as if sensing something they couldn't quite identify.
You know what I think?
Kai said, his voice rising slightly.
I think you're all afraid.
Afraid that maybe caring about others isn't weakness, maybe it's the strongest thing anyone can do.
Maybe that's why you work so hard to crush it whenever you see it.
The accusation hung in the air like a challenge, and Kai immediately regretted speaking so boldly. He was outnumbered, far from any human support, and had just insulted some of the galaxy's most powerful merchant species. The smart thing would have been to apologize, to back down and accept whatever punishment they deemed appropriate. Instead, he stood his ground. How dare you, the Zephyrian snarled, his blue scales darkening with rage.
You insignificant little mammal, you enough.
The word came from the pale woman, spoken so quietly it should have been lost in the crowd's noise. Instead, it seemed to cut through every other sound, reaching every ear with crystal clarity. The effect was immediate and unsettling. Conversations stopped mid-sentence, footsteps faltered, and even the station's background hum seemed to diminish. Every alien in the immediate area turned to look at the speaker, their expressions ranging from confusion to irritation to something approaching recognition. The woman slowly stood, her movements graceful despite her obvious weakness, and Kai found himself stepping back involuntarily. There was something in her posture, in the way she held herself, that suggested this was not someone accustomed to being ignored. I said enough, she repeated, her musical voice carrying an unmistakable note of authority. This child has shown more honor in 5 minutes than any of you have displayed in your entire lives.
I suggest you remember that. The Zephyrian trader laughed nervously, but the sound seemed forced. Listen to this.
The beggar thinks she can lecture her betters. Someone should teach her proper respect for. His words died as the woman's eyes met his, and Kai saw something impossible happen. The proud, arrogant traitor, a member of a species known for their unshakable confidence, took an involuntary step backward. His blue scales had gone pale, and his forked tongue darted out repeatedly as if tasting something he didn't like. "Do you know who I am?" the woman asked, her voice still quiet but somehow carrying the weight of mountains. Around them, the crowd had grown larger as more beings were drawn by the commotion. Kai noticed that some of the newcomers were wearing the distinctive uniforms of station security, their hands resting on their weapons with practiced ease. The situation was escalating beyond a simple marketplace dispute. "You're nobody," the Zephyrian said, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. "Just another displaced person looking for handouts. The galaxy is full of your kind." The woman tilted her head slightly, and Kai caught a glimpse of something beneath her tattered clothing, a small pendant or brooch that seemed to catch the light in impossible ways. Several aliens in the crowd gasped, their eyes widening with sudden recognition and what looked like fear. "I am Zarathel and Althys," she said simply. "And you, traitor Vex Coral of the merchant house Slyth, have just made a very serious mistake." The effect of her words was immediate and dramatic. The Zephyrian traitor's face went from pale blue to nearly white, his pupils dilating with shock. Around him, his companions began backing away as if distance could somehow protect them from whatever they had just unleashed. The crowd's murmur grew louder, filled with alien words that Kai didn't recognize but whose tone needed no translation. That's impossible," the traitor whispered. "Queen Zarathel died years ago. The entire royal family was lost when their ship was attacked by pirates who sold false information about our deaths to cover their escape," the woman finished calmly. "I have spent 3 years living among the galaxy's forgotten people, learning what my subjects truly face when they believe no one of importance is watching." She turned to look at Kai, her dark eyes now blazing with an inner fire that seemed to illuminate her entire face. This human child showed kindness to someone he believed to be powerless, expecting nothing in return. "Tell me, Vex Coral, when was the last time you showed such honor?" The marketplace had fallen completely silent except for the sound of rain against metal. Even the security officers seemed frozen in place, uncertain how to handle a situation that had suddenly escalated far beyond their authority. Kai found himself staring at the woman, the queen, with a mixture of awe and confusion. "But why were you sitting there?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why didn't you tell anyone who you were?" Queen Zarathel's expression softened as she looked at him. "Because I needed to know the truth about my galaxy, young one. And, today, through your eyes, I have seen it more clearly than ever before." She turned back to the crowd, her voice carrying easily across the hushed marketplace. "Let this moment be remembered. A human child showed me greater respect and kindness than any of you managed, despite your supposed superiority. Perhaps it is time to question which species truly deserves to be called civilized." The Zephyrian traitor was now visibly trembling, his earlier arrogance completely gone. "Your Majesty, we didn't know, if I had realized." "Exactly," the Queen said, her voice cutting like a blade. "You didn't know, so you showed your true nature. And, now everyone has seen it." Kai felt the weight of hundreds of alien eyes upon him, their expressions ranging from curiosity to amazement to something that might have been respect. For the first time since arriving at Zirion, he didn't feel like an outsider looking in. Instead, he felt like he stood at the center of something important, a moment that might change how the galaxy saw his people. But, as Queen Zarathel placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, Kai realized that this was only the beginning. Whatever happened next would determine not just his own fate, but possibly the future relationship between humanity and the rest of galactic civilization. The rain continued to fall, but somehow it no longer seemed quite so cold. The silence that followed Queen Zarathel's revelation stretched like a taut wire across the marketplace. Kai could hear his own heartbeat thundering in his ears as he tried to process what had just happened. The frail, forgotten woman he had offered a simple meal to was apparently one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. The irony wasn't lost on him. In trying to help someone he thought was powerless, he had unknowingly aided royalty. Station security officers began pushing through the crowd, their faces pale with panic. Kai recognized the look. It was the same expression his ship's captain had worn when they received word that their navigation system had failed near hegemony space. It was the face of people who suddenly realized they were in far deeper trouble than they had imagined. "Your Majesty," the lead security officer stammered, his universal translator struggling with what sounded like 3 different languages being spoken simultaneously. We had no idea you were aboard the station.
If we had known. You would have what? Queen Zarathel asked, her voice deceptively calm. Treated me with the respect due to any sentient being? The same respect this human child showed me without knowing my identity?
The security officer's 4 eyes blinked in rapid succession, a sign of extreme distress among his species.
Of course, Your Majesty.
We would have provided proper accommodations, protection, anything you required. Yet when you saw me sitting hungry and forgotten, you walked past like all the others. The Queen's words carried no anger, but somehow that made them more devastating than any shouting could have been.
Tell me, Officer Grixtal, what does that say about the state of galactic civilization?
Kai watched the exchange with growing amazement. This woman, this queen, wasn't using her power to punish or intimidate. Instead, she was using it to teach, to hold up a mirror that forced everyone present to examine their own actions. It was a lesson in leadership that put every human politician he had ever seen to shame. The Zephyrian traitor, Vex Coral, had dropped to his knees in what Kai assumed was his species' version of a formal apology. His blue scales were now completely colorless, and his serpentine body trembled with what appeared to be genuine terror. Around him, his former companions had melted away into the crowd, unwilling to be associated with someone who had just insulted galactic royalty. Please, Your Majesty, Vex Coral whispered, his forked tongue flickering rapidly. I beg forgiveness for my words. I spoke in ignorance, without wisdom.
If there is any way I can make amends.
Queen Zarathel studied him for a long moment, and Kai could see her weighing her response carefully. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of absolute authority.
You will make amends, traitor.
But, not to me, to him. She gestured toward Kai, who felt his stomach drop as every eye in the marketplace focused on him again. You insulted not just a child, but a member of a species that has shown more genuine honor in one act than your entire trading house has demonstrated in years.
Yes, Your Majesty.
Of course. Vex Coral's voice was barely audible.
Young human, I apologize for my words.
They were wrong, and I spoke without wisdom. Kai looked down at the kneeling alien, feeling deeply uncomfortable with the entire situation. This wasn't how he had imagined his day going when he woke up that morning. All he had wanted was to explore the station and, maybe find some interesting alien technology to examine. Instead, he had stumbled into what appeared to be a galactic incident. It's okay, Kai said finally, his voice uncertain.
I mean, apology accepted. But, you don't have to kneel.
That's weird. A sound that might have been suppressed laughter came from somewhere in the crowd, and even Queen Zarathel's lips twitched slightly. Kai realized he had just told one of the galaxy's most prominent traders to stand up in front of a queen, and he felt his face burning with embarrassment.
I mean, if that's appropriate, Your Majesty, he added quickly.
I don't really know the proper protocols for this kind of situation. There are no protocols for this situation, the queen replied, and now she was definitely smiling. I suspect this may be the first time in galactic history that a human has been publicly apologized to by a Zephyrian trading master in front of a queen who was disguised as a beggar.
We are breaking new ground here.
The crowd began to murmur among themselves, and Kai caught fragments of conversation in various alien languages. His universal translator was working overtime to keep up, but he caught enough to understand that news of this encounter was already spreading throughout the station. Within hours, it would probably reach every major world in this sector of the galaxy. Your Majesty, a new voice called from the edge of the crowd. Kai turned to see a group of aliens approaching, their ornate clothing marking them as diplomats or high-ranking officials. The speaker was a tall, elegant being with crystalline skin that reflected the station's lights in prismatic patterns.
I am Ambassador HYSSera of the Crystalline Collective. We had no knowledge of your presence on this station. Because I chose not to announce it, Queen Zarathel replied calmly. I have been traveling incognito for some time, learning about the galaxy from a different perspective. Ambassador HYSSera's crystalline features shifted in what Kai recognized as confusion.
But, Your Majesty, surely such a journey is dangerous.
To travel without proper escort, without security.
Without the ability to see how my subjects truly live when they believe no one important is watching, the Queen finished.
Tell me, Ambassador, when was the last time you spoke to someone truly powerless? Someone who had nothing to offer you in return? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Ambassador HFY's prismatic skin flickered through several colors before settling on a dull gray that suggested discomfort.
That is to say, my duties require me to focus on matters of state.
Of course they do, the Queen said softly.
And that is precisely the problem. We have become so focused on matters of state that we have forgotten about matters of the heart.
We judge entire species by their political usefulness rather than their character.
She turned to address the growing crowd, her voice carrying easily across the marketplace. This human child saw someone in need and offered help without hesitation. He asked nothing in return, expected no reward, and showed no concern for whether the gesture would benefit him.
Tell me, how many of you can say the same?
The silence that followed was deafening. Kai found himself shifting uncomfortably under the weight of so much attention. He wasn't a hero or a saint, he was just a 16-year-old who had seen someone hungry and shared his food. The fact that this simple act was being treated as something remarkable said more about the galaxy's problems than his own virtues.
Your Majesty speaks truly, came a voice from the crowd.
An elderly Corvan stepped forward, his weathered features showing signs of genuine shame. I have passed by many in need, telling myself that such matters were not my concern. I see now that this was merely an excuse for cowardice. Other voices began to join in, a chorus of admission that gradually built throughout the marketplace. Kai watched in amazement as beings from dozens of different species began acknowledging their own failures of compassion. It was like watching a dam burst, releasing years of suppressed guilt and regret. But not everyone was moved by the Queen's words. Near the back of the crowd, Kai could see a group of hegemony officials whispering among themselves, their gray faces twisted with obvious displeasure.
The hegemony prided itself on logical, emotionless decision-making, and they clearly viewed this display of sentiment as weakness.
One of them, a tall figure with the rank insignia of a senior administrator, stepped forward. Your Majesty, while we respect your educational journey, surely you can see the danger in encouraging such primitive emotional responses. The galaxy has achieved stability through rational thought and logical governance.
These human sentiments, while perhaps admirable in small doses, could prove disruptive if allowed to spread.
Queen Zarathel's expression hardened, and Kai felt the temperature around them seemed to drop several degrees. When she spoke, her voice carried the kind of authority that had been forged in the crucible of interstellar war.
Administrator Kethval, isn't it?
From the reports that cross my desk, your logical governance has resulted in a 30% increase in poverty across hegemony worlds, while your own administrative costs have risen by twice that amount. Please, explain to me the logic in that. The hegemony official's gray skin flushed darker.
Your Majesty, those statistics are taken out of context. The efficiency gains from our new policies will what? Feed the hungry? House the homeless? Provide hope to those who have lost everything?
The Queen's voice cut through his excuses like a blade.
Or will they simply make your reports look better while real people continue to suffer? Kai found himself holding his breath as the confrontation escalated.
He had heard about the political tensions between various galactic powers, but he had never imagined he would witness such a high-level diplomatic clash in person. The fact that it had started with his simple act of kindness made the situation even more surreal. The hegemony has always maintained that emotion clouds judgment, Administrator Kethval said stiffly.
This human's actions, while perhaps well-intentioned, demonstrate exactly the kind of irrational decision-making that leads to chaos.
He gave away resources without calculating the cost, without considering the broader implications. He saw someone hungry and shared his food, Queen Zarathel interrupted, her voice rising for the first time since the encounter began.
If you consider that irrational, then perhaps your logic is more flawed than you realize.
The marketplace had grown so quiet that Kai could hear the station's air circulation systems humming in the background. Hundreds of beings stood transfixed, watching what might be the most significant diplomatic confrontation in recent galactic history play out over a simple act of human kindness. Furthermore, the Queen continued, her gaze sweeping across the assembled crowd, I find it interesting that the only species represented here today that showed genuine compassion was humanity, supposedly the most primitive and emotion-driven race in the galaxy.
What does that say about the rest of us? Ambassador HFY's crystalline skin had shifted to a deep blue that Kai's translator identified as extreme embarrassment. Your Majesty, surely you don't mean to suggest that human emotional instability is something to be emulated.
I mean to suggest that perhaps we have confused emotional maturity with emotional sterility, the Queen replied. This young man didn't help me because it was logical or profitable or politically advantageous. He helped me because it was right. When was the last time any of you made a decision based solely on moral conviction? The question struck the assembled diplomats and officials like a physical blow. Kai could see them struggling to find an answer, their various alien features displaying universal signs of discomfort and introspection. It occurred to him that these beings, some of the most powerful individuals in the galaxy, might not have faced such a direct moral challenge in years. "Your Majesty," came a new voice from the crowd. A young Zephyrian female pushed through the assembled beings, her blue scales bright with what Kai's translator indicated was determination. "With respect, you speak of moral conviction as if it were simple. But governance requires difficult choices. Sometimes we must choose between competing moral goods." Queen Zarathel turned her attention to the newcomer, and Kai noticed that her expression softened slightly. "What is your name, young one?" "Silthara Nex, Your Majesty. Junior diplomat with the Zephyrian Trade Confederation." The young alien stood straighter, clearly nervous but unwilling to back down. "I don't disagree with your words, but surely you understand that those of us in positions of responsibility cannot always act on pure emotion. We must consider consequences, implications." "And what were the consequences of this human's actions today?" the Queen asked gently. Silthara blinked, her serpentine features showing confusion. Well, no direct harm was done, but..." "No direct harm," the Queen repeated. "And what about indirect benefits?" This boy's simple act of kindness has sparked the most honest conversation about galactic morality that I have witnessed in years. His willingness to help someone he believed to be powerless has revealed more about the character of our various species than 1,000 diplomatic summits. She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. "Tell me, Diplomat Nex, what consequences could be more important than that?" The young Zephyrian stood silent for a long moment, her forked tongue flicking out thoughtfully. Finally, she spoke. "You are right, Your Majesty. I have been so focused on potential problems that I failed to see actual solutions. This human, Kai, has accomplished something remarkable today." Hearing his name spoken aloud by an alien diplomat made the situation feel even more surreal to Kai. He was starting to understand that this encounter would follow him for the rest of his life. Whether that would prove to be a blessing or a curse remained to be seen. "Indeed he has," Queen Zarathel agreed. "And I suspect this is only the beginning. Young Kai has shown us something we had forgotten, that true strength comes not from power or logic or political maneuvering, but from the courage to do what is right, even when no one is watching." As if summoned by her words, another group approached through the crowd. These beings wore the distinctive uniforms of the Galactic News Network, their recording devices already active. Kai's heart sank as he realized that this encounter was about to become very public indeed. "Your Majesty," the lead reporter called out, a multi-limbed being whose species Kai didn't recognize. "Can you confirm that you have been traveling incognito throughout the galaxy? And what can you tell us about this human who apparently aided you?" Queen Zarathel looked at Kai, her dark eyes asking a silent question. He found himself nodding slightly, understanding that there was no going back now. Whatever happened next, his life had just changed forever. "Yes," the Queen replied to the reporter. "I can confirm that I have been traveling among my subjects to better understand their daily struggles. And this young human, Kai Chen, has provided me with the most valuable lesson of my entire journey." The recording devices swiveled toward Kai like predatory insects, and he felt his mouth go dry. In a few hours, his face would be broadcast across the galaxy. His simple act of kindness was about to make him the most famous human alive. But, as Queen Zarathel squeezed his shoulder gently, Kai realized that fame might be the least of his concerns. He had apparently just become the unwitting symbol of humanity's place in galactic civilization. The question now was whether that symbol would help his species or destroy it. The recording devices hummed with electronic life as they captured every word, every gesture, every nuance of what was rapidly becoming the most significant interspecies incident in recent galactic history. Kai found himself at the center of a storm he had never wanted to create, his simple act of kindness transforming into something far larger and more dangerous than he could have imagined. The Galactic News Network reporter, whose nameplate identified him as Chronicler Vithtar, adjusted his multiple recording appendages to capture the scene from every angle. His species was known throughout the galaxy for their obsessive attention to detail and their ability to ask the questions no one else dared to voice. Your Majesty, Vithtar began, his mechanical voice translator giving his words an oddly musical quality. Sources indicate that you disappeared from your homeworld nearly 3 years ago under mysterious circumstances. Can you explain why you chose to live as you did, rather than reveal your identity and seek appropriate assistance? Queen Zarathel's expression remained composed, but Kai could see something flicker in her dark eyes, a pain that ran deeper than mere physical discomfort. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of someone who had seen the worst of galactic civilization up close. I chose this path because sitting on a throne, surrounded by advisors and protocols, I had lost touch with the reality my subjects face daily. How can I rule wisely if I don't understand what life is truly like for those who have no voice, no power, no hope? But, surely, Your Majesty, interrupted Ambassador Thysera, his crystalline features shifting through nervous color patterns, such an approach was unnecessarily dangerous. Your safety is paramount to galactic stability. If harm had come to you. Harm did come to me, the Queen replied quietly. The same harm that comes to millions of beings across the galaxy every day. Hunger. Cold. The casual cruelty of those who have forgotten that power carries responsibility. Her gaze swept across the assembled crowd. The only difference is that my suffering was temporary, by choice. For others, it is a daily reality with no end in sight. Chronicler Vithtar's recording devices swiveled toward Kai, who felt his stomach clench with anxiety. And, you, young human Nikai-chan, according to our initial scans, what prompted you to assist someone you believed to be just another displaced person? The question hung in the air like a challenge, and Kai could feel the weight of hundreds of alien eyes upon him. In the distance, he could see more news crews arriving, their equipment casting strange shadows across the marketplace. Whatever he said next would be analyzed, dissected, and broadcast to every inhabited world in the galaxy. I don't know, Kai said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. She looked hungry. I had food. It seemed obvious. The simplicity of his answer seemed to surprise the assembled crowd. Kai could hear murmurs in various alien languages, and his universal translator was picking up words that roughly translated to primitive, instinctive, and illogical. But there were other words too: pure, noble, and wise. Obvious, Chronicler Vithtar repeated, as if testing the word's meaning. You saw a being in distress and immediately chose to help, without calculating personal cost or benefit? I guess so, Kai replied, growing more uncomfortable by the moment. I mean, it was just a food packet. I can get another one from the ship's stores. But, you didn't know that she could repay you, pressed another reporter, this one from the Hegemony Broadcasting Collective. For all you knew, this was simply a resource lost forever. How do you justify such inefficiency? Kai stared at the reporter, trying to process the question. The idea that helping someone needed to be justified seemed fundamentally wrong to him, but he struggled to articulate why. Around him, the various alien species watched with expressions ranging from curiosity to confusion to something that might have been pity. I don't think it needs justification, he said slowly. If someone's hungry and you have food, you share. If someone's cold and you have a blanket, you offer it. That's just how things should work. Administrator Kethbal of the Hegemony stepped forward, his gray features arranged in what Kai had learned was their species' expression of logical superiority. Young human, your sentiment is admirable but naive. Resources are finite. If everyone gave away their possessions to every being in need, the economic system would collapse within days. Surely you can see the flaw in your reasoning. But, I'm not talking about everyone, Kai replied, frustration finally breaking through his nervousness. I'm talking about one person helping another person in that moment. Maybe if more individuals did that, we wouldn't need such a complicated economic system to manage suffering. The words left his mouth before he could stop them, and Kai immediately regretted speaking so boldly. He had just criticized the fundamental basis of galactic civilization in front of some of its most powerful representatives. The smart thing would be to apologize, to back down, to claim he was young and foolish and didn't understand the complexities involved. Instead, he found himself continuing. I mean, look around, he said, his voice growing stronger. You're all incredibly advanced. You can travel between stars, manipulate gravity, communicate instantly across the galaxy. But, you can't figure out how to make sure everyone has enough to eat? You can't solve the problem of beings dying alone and forgotten in the shadows of your great achievements? The marketplace had fallen completely silent. Even the sound of rain against metal seemed muted, as if the station itself was holding its breath. Kai realized he had crossed a line from which there might be no return, but something inside him refused to stop. My species might be primitive by your standards, he continued, his words coming faster now. We might be too emotional, too illogical, too willing to act without calculating every possible consequence. But, at least we try to help each other. At least we remember that intelligence without compassion is just sophisticated cruelty. The silence that followed was deafening. Kai could see shock, anger, and something that might have been shame playing across the various alien faces around him. He had just accused the galaxy's most advanced civilizations of moral bankruptcy, and he wasn't entirely sure he was wrong. Queen Zarathel placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, and, when she spoke, her voice carried a note of profound sadness. From the mouths of children, she murmured. Kai has just articulated something I have been struggling to express for years. We have become so sophisticated in our thinking that we have forgotten how to feel. Your Majesty, came a new voice from the crowd. A figure stepped forward, tall, imposing, with the distinctive features of the Valerian Imperium. Kai recognized the species from his studies. They were known for their military prowess and rigid honor codes. I am General THYSS Cole of the Imperial Fleet. While I respect your perspective, surely you cannot seriously suggest that we abandon rational governance in favor of human emotionalism. I suggest nothing of the sort, Queen Zarathel replied calmly. I suggest that we have allowed rationality to become an excuse for indifference. This young man didn't abandon logic when he helped me, he demonstrated a deeper logic, one that recognizes that a society's true strength lies in how it treats its weakest members. General THYSS Cole's scarred features showed skepticism. With respect, Your Majesty, the Valerian Imperium has maintained stability for over 2 millennia through strength and discipline. Our military efficiency has resulted in the most peaceful era in galactic history, the Queen acknowledged. But, at what cost? When was the last time a Valerian officer showed mercy to a defeated enemy? When did your people last demonstrate compassion that wasn't tactically advantageous? The general's hand moved instinctively toward his weapon, then stopped as he remembered where he was. The Imperium shows mercy when it serves the greater good, he said stiffly. And who determines this greater good? Kai asked, surprised by his own boldness. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like the greater good mostly benefits people who are already powerful. General THYSS Cole's eyes fixed on Kai with predatory intensity. You speak of matters beyond your understanding, human child. The decisions we make affect billions of lives across hundreds of worlds. We cannot afford to be guided by sentiment. I'm not talking about sentiment, Kai shot back, his fear finally giving way to anger. I'm talking about basic decency. You all act like kindness is some kind of weakness that interferes with your important work, but maybe your important work isn't as important as you think it is. The confrontation was escalating beyond diplomatic norms, and Kai could see security officers beginning to move closer. But, before anyone could intervene, Queen Zarathel stepped between them. General, this child has done something remarkable today, she said, her voice carrying absolute authority. He has reminded us all that true strength comes from protecting the vulnerable, not exploiting them. Perhaps it's time we learned from his example rather than dismissing it. You cannot seriously suggest that we restructure galactic governance based on the naive idealism of a human adolescent, General THYSS Cole protested. I suggest that we have forgotten what governance is supposed to accomplish, the Queen replied. We have become so focused on maintaining order that we have lost sight of why order matters in the first place. It should serve to protect and nurture all life, not just preserve the privileges of the few. Chronicler Vithtar's recording devices were working overtime, capturing every word of what was clearly becoming a pivotal moment in galactic politics. Other news crews had arrived, and Kai could see that the entire incident was being broadcast live across multiple networks. His simple act of sharing food was triggering a galaxy-wide conversation about the very nature of civilization. Your Majesty speaks of noble ideals, came another voice from the crowd. An elderly Zephyrian female stepped forward, her blue scales dulled with age but her eyes bright with intelligence. But I have lived for over 3 centuries, and I have seen what happens when emotion overrides reason. Wars, famines, the collapse of entire star systems. Surely you cannot ignore these lessons. Queen Zarathel turned to face the elderly speaker, her expression respectful. Elder Saxthara, your wisdom is well known throughout the galaxy. But, I would ask you this, in all your centuries of experience, which has caused more suffering, acts of compassion or acts of calculated indifference? The question hung in the air like a challenge, and Kai could see the elder Zephyrian struggling with the implications. Around her, the crowd waited in tense silence for her response. Elder Saxthara began, then stopped. Her ancient features showed genuine confusion, as if she had never considered the question from that angle before. The acts of compassion that went wrong are more memorable, more dramatic. But, perhaps, the Queen continued gently, the quiet acts of kindness that prevent suffering are less visible than the spectacular failures that follow from its absence. This young human didn't create a crisis today, he revealed one that already existed. The crisis of a galaxy that has forgotten how to care. As if summoned by her words, a commotion arose from the edge of the crowd. Security officers were attempting to maintain order as more beings pressed in to witness the historic confrontation. Among the newcomers, Kai spotted several figures wearing the distinctive robes of the Galactic Council, the governing body that oversaw interspecies relations. One of them, a tall being with the distinctive features of the ancillary species, pushed through the crowd with obvious urgency. "Your Majesty," he called out, his voice carrying the authority of high office. "I am Counselor Veltar, first speaker of the Galactic Assembly. We have been monitoring this situation, and must respectfully request that you accompany us for a more private discussion." Queen Zarathel's expression hardened. "Counselor, I appreciate your concern, but this conversation is far from over. The galaxy deserves to hear what has been said here today." "With respect, Your Majesty," Counselor Veltar replied, his tone diplomatically neutral, "this incident has already begun to destabilize several key trade agreements and military alliances. The hegemony is threatening to withdraw from the Mutual Defense Pact, and 3 separate species have filed formal protests with the Council regarding your statements about their governance practices." Kai felt a chill run down his spine as he realized the broader implications of what was happening. His simple act of kindness had somehow triggered what appeared to be a galactic political crisis. Ships could already be moving toward defensive positions, trade routes might be closing, and diplomatic relationships forged over centuries could be collapsing. "So the truth is destabilizing," Queen Zarathel observed calmly. "How interesting. I wonder what that says about the stability we thought we had achieved." "Your Majesty," Counselor Veltar pressed, "surely you understand that regardless of the moral implications, we cannot allow this situation to escalate into open conflict. Too many lives depend on maintaining the current balance of power. And what about the lives that depend on changing it?" Kai found himself asking, his voice carrying farther than he had intended. "What about all the people who are suffering right now because maintaining your balance is more important than doing what's right?" Every eye in the marketplace turned toward him, and Kai felt the full weight of galactic attention focused on his words. He had just challenged the fundamental basis of interstellar politics, questioned the wisdom of beings who had governed the galaxy for millennia, and implied that their carefully constructed peace was built on a foundation of moral compromise. In the silence that followed, Kai realized that there was no going back. His life, his species' future, and possibly the fate of galactic civilization itself now hung in the balance. The question was whether the galaxy would choose to learn from a human boy's simple act of compassion, or whether it would crush him to preserve the comfortable lies upon which its power was built. The rain continued to fall, but now it sounded like the drumbeat of approaching war. The tension in the marketplace had reached a breaking point. Kai could feel the weight of history pressing down on him as hundreds of alien beings waited for someone to make the next move. The rain continued its relentless assault on the station's metal structure, creating a percussive backdrop to what might be the most important moment in galactic politics for a generation. Counselor Veltar stepped closer to Queen Zarathel, his expression grave with the responsibility of preventing a crisis that could shatter the carefully maintained peace between star systems. "Your Majesty, I implore you to consider the consequences. Already, our monitoring stations are reporting military vessels moving into defensive positions across 3 sectors. The hegemony is demanding an immediate explanation of your activities, and the Valerian Imperium has placed its fleet on high alert." "Because a human child shared his food with someone in need," Queen Zarathel replied, her voice carrying a note of bitter irony. "Tell me, Counselor, what does it say about our civilization that such a simple act of kindness can threaten interstellar war?" Before Counselor Veltar could respond, another voice cut through the crowd, younger, more urgent, and tinged with excitement rather than fear. "Your Majesty! Your Majesty!" A small figure pushed through the assembled beings, moving with the determined energy of someone who had important news to share. Kai turned to see a young member of what appeared to be the maintenance crew, a diminutive alien with large eyes and nimble fingers that marked him as one of the station's technical specialists. His species was known for their mechanical aptitude and their tendency to remain unnoticed by the galaxy's more powerful races. Engineer Piptel, Queen Zarathel acknowledged with a slight smile.
You seem excited about something.
The young engineer's eyes were practically glowing with enthusiasm.
Yes, Your Majesty.
I've been monitoring the galactic communication networks, and something amazing is happening. The broadcast of what happened here today, it's spreading everywhere, and people are responding. He pulled out a small data pad, his fingers dancing across its surface with practiced ease.
Look at this, reports are coming in from across the galaxy.
Beings are starting to help each other in ways they haven't for years. On Zirian Prime, a group of Valerian officers just distributed their emergency rations to refugee families. On the trade station at Kepler's Rest, merchants are setting up free food distribution centers. The datapad screen flickered with incoming reports, and Kai could see the amazement in the young engineer's features as he continued reading.
It's not just isolated incidents, it's happening on hundreds of worlds. The human's example is inspiring people to remember something they had forgotten.
Chronicler Vithtar's recording devices swiveled toward the engineer, capturing every word.
Can you provide specific examples of these incidents?
Yes, absolutely.
Piptel's enthusiasm was infectious.
On Zephyra 2, the Planetary Council just announced emergency funding for homeless shelters, the first time they've addressed the issue in over a decade. The Crystalline Collective has suspended debt collection proceedings for over 10,000 families facing economic hardship. Even the hegemony worlds are reporting spontaneous acts of charity. General Thys Cole stepped forward, his scarred features showing skepticism.
Emotional responses to propaganda broadcasts. Such sentiment will fade within days once rational thought reasserts itself.
Maybe, Queen Zarathel replied.
Or maybe we're witnessing something far more significant.
The awakening of a moral conscience that we thought had been permanently suppressed by the demands of efficient governance. She turned to address the crowd, her voice carrying across the marketplace with renewed authority.
My friends, we stand at a crossroads.
We can retreat to our comfortable assumptions about the necessity of calculated indifference, or we can embrace the possibility that a better galaxy is within our reach. Your Majesty, Administrator Kethval interjected, his gray features showing visible distress. The economic implications of these charitable impulses could be catastrophic. If every world suddenly begins redistributing resources based on emotional rather than logical criteria, then we might finally have a galaxy worth governing, Kai said, his voice carrying a strength that surprised even him. You keep talking about economic systems and political stability like they're more important than actual people. But what good is a perfect system if it crushes the things that make life worth living? The young human stepped forward, no longer intimidated by the powerful beings surrounding him. The weight of their attention had become familiar, and, with that familiarity came a strange kind of confidence. I've been listening to all of you talk about the dangers of compassion, the risks of helping others, the need to maintain order above all else.
But, you know what I think?
I think you're all scared. Scared that if people start caring about each other again, they might not need your complicated systems and rules and hierarchies.
Administrator Kethval's skin flushed darker.
Young human, you have no understanding of the complexities involved in governing billions of beings across thousands of worlds.
You're right, Kai agreed. I don't understand those complexities. But, I understand people. And, people don't need to be governed as much as you think they do.
They need to be trusted, supported, and given the chance to take care of each other. Naive idealism, General Thys Cole muttered, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. Maybe, Kai replied. But, your sophisticated realism has produced a galaxy where queens have to disguise themselves as beggars to learn the truth about their own people. Where kindness is considered a political threat and helping someone in need can trigger interstellar incidents.
If that's sophistication, I'll take naive idealism any day.
A new voice spoke from the edge of the crowd, elderly, measured, and carrying the weight of vast experience.
Perhaps the child has a point.
Every head turned toward the speaker, and Kai heard gasps of recognition from various aliens in the crowd. The figure walking slowly toward them was ancient even by galactic standards, his crystalline form showing the characteristic clouding that marked extreme age among his species. Elder Crysththyss, Queen Zarathel breathed, her voice filled with reverence.
I didn't know you were on the station.
I came when I heard about your situation, the ancient being replied, his voice like wine through crystal formations. And I have been listening to this remarkable conversation with great interest. Elder Crysththyss was legendary throughout the galaxy, the oldest living being in known space, witness to the rise and fall of civilizations that had existed long before most current species had developed space travel. His words carried weight that transcended politics or military power. In my long life, he continued, I have seen countless experiments in governance. I have watched empires built on logic collapse into chaos, and civilizations founded on emotion destroy themselves through passion. But I have also seen something else, moments when simple truth cuts through all complexity and reveals what really matters. He turned his ancient gaze toward Kai, and the young human felt as though he was being examined by the weight of history itself. This human child has reminded us of something we had forgotten in our pursuit of sophisticated solutions to complex problems. Sometimes, the most profound wisdom comes not from grand theories but from simple truths acted upon without hesitation. But, Elder, Counselor Veltar protested, surely you cannot suggest that we abandon the systems that have maintained galactic peace for centuries. I suggest that peace built on the suppression of compassion is no peace at all, Elder Crysththyss replied.
It is merely the absence of open conflict, not the presence of genuine harmony.
True peace comes when beings care enough about each other to make the difficult choices that protect the vulnerable. Engineer Piptel looked up from his datapad, his eyes wide with wonder.
Elder, the reports keep coming in.
It's not just charity and aid, people are talking to each other across species lines in ways they haven't for decades. The communication networks are buzzing with conversations about cooperation, understanding, mutual support. Because they have been given permission to care again, Queen Zarathel observed. For too long, we have told our people that compassion is inefficient, that emotional responses are primitive, that true civilization requires the suppression of our deepest moral instincts. Today, one human boy showed us the falseness of those assumptions. She walked over to Kai and placed both hands on his shoulders, looking directly into his eyes. You have given the galaxy a great gift today, young Kai Chen.
You have reminded us who we are supposed to be.
I just shared my lunch, Kai protested weakly, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was happening around him. You shared your humanity, the Queen corrected gently. And, in doing so, you have shown us all what we could become if we had the courage to follow your example. Chronicler Vithtar stepped forward, his recording devices capturing every nuance of the moment.
Your Majesty, what happens now?
How do we address the political crisis that this incident has triggered? Queen Zarathel smiled, and, for the first time since revealing her identity, she looked truly happy.
We embrace it.
We acknowledge that our current systems have failed to serve their most important function, protecting and nurturing life in all its forms. And we begin the difficult work of building something better.
The hegemony will never accept such changes, Administrator Kethball warned. They view emotional governance as an existential threat to galactic stability.
Then, perhaps it's time for the hegemony to learn what real stability looks like, General Thys Cole said quietly. Every eye turned toward him in surprise, and the scarred warrior's expression showed a thoughtfulness that hadn't been there before. I have spent my life maintaining order through strength and discipline. But I have never seen order maintained through kindness.
Perhaps it is worth attempting. The admission from the Valerian general sent ripples of shock through the assembled crowd.
If the military wing of galactic governance was beginning to question its fundamental assumptions, then change might actually be possible. It won't be easy, Elder Crysththyss warned.
Compassion requires more courage than conquest, more strength than domination. It means making decisions based not on what benefits the powerful, but on what serves the powerless.
It means accepting that sometimes the right choice is also the difficult choice. But if we don't try, Kai said, his voice carrying across the silent marketplace, then what's the point of all your advanced technology and sophisticated systems? What good is galactic civilization if it doesn't make life better for everyone? The question hung in the air like a challenge to every assumption the galaxy had made about itself. In the silence that followed, Kai could hear something he hadn't noticed before, the sound of voices, growing closer. Through the rain and the crowd, he could see more beings approaching the marketplace, drawn by reports of what was happening. They weren't officials or diplomats or military officers. They were ordinary people, workers, families, beings from every species and walk of life who had heard about a human boy's act of kindness and wanted to see for themselves what was happening. As they gathered around the edges of the crowd, Kai realized that the conversation had moved beyond the realm of high politics and into something far more fundamental. "Look around you," Queen Zarathel said, gesturing toward the growing crowd. "These are the people we claim to serve. They understand what Kai did today in ways that our councils and committees and administrative hierarchies never could. They remember what it means to care for one another." Engineer Piptel looked up from his data pad again, his voice filled with wonder. "The networks are showing spontaneous gatherings on over 300 worlds. People are coming together, sharing resources, organizing mutual aid societies. It's like the galaxy is remembering how to be a community instead of just a collection of competing interests." "So what do we do?" Counselor Veltar asked, and, for the first time, his voice carried hope instead of fear. "We lead by example," Queen Zarathel replied. "We acknowledge that the path to a better galaxy begins with individuals choosing compassion over convenience, service over self-interest, courage over comfort." She turned to face the crowd of ordinary beings who had gathered to witness this moment. "My friends, today you have seen something remarkable." A young human showed kindness to a stranger without knowing who she was or what he might gain from the gesture. In that simple act, he demonstrated more wisdom than all our councils and treaties combined. Her voice rose, carrying across the marketplace and, beyond, broadcast live to worlds throughout the galaxy. The question now is what we do with that wisdom. Do we retreat to our comfortable assumptions about the necessity of calculated indifference? Or do we have the courage to build a galaxy worthy of this young man's example? The response was immediate and overwhelming. From the ordinary beings gathered around the marketplace came a sound Kai had never heard before, dozens of different species, speaking in their own languages, but somehow creating a harmony that transcended the barriers of translation. It was the sound of hope, of possibility, of a galaxy finally, ready to remember what it meant to care. As the rain began to lessen and the first hints of artificial sunlight broke through the station's weather system, Kai found himself at the center of something he had never imagined possible. His simple act of sharing food with a hungry stranger had become the spark that ignited a galaxy-wide awakening of conscience. The path ahead would be difficult. There would be resistance from those who benefited from the old systems, setbacks from those who feared change, and challenges that couldn't be solved with good intentions alone. But, for the first time in generations, the galaxy had remembered something essential about itself. It had remembered how to hope. And, sometimes, as Kai was learning, hope is the most powerful force in the universe, strong enough to transform not just individual lives, but entire civilizations. As Queen Zarathel had said, it all began with the courage to do what was right, even when no one was watching. Especially when no one was watching. In the end, that might be the most human trait of all, the willingness to help others not because it was logical or profitable or politically advantageous, but simply because it was right. And, perhaps, Kai thought as he watched beings from across the galaxy embrace that simple truth, that was exactly what the universe needed to remember. The rain had stopped completely now, and the artificial sun was breaking through the clouds, casting everything in warm, golden light. It felt like the beginning of something new, something better, something worth hoping for. And it had all started with a human boy who saw someone hungry and decided to share his lunch.